In this video, I'm going to show you how to simulate scratchboard or engraving style illustrations digitally. But before we get into it, let me show you some of the illustrations that I did using this exact same process I described in this video. Let's dive in, starting with the tools. These are the traditional tools I use: a regular sketch pad, a drafting pencil, 3 more colored pencils, and an eraser. Now you may be wondering, what? This guy still uses these ancient tools? What is he, like a dinosaur? Seriously though, nothing beats the familiarity of sketching on paper, in my opinion. If you don't want to use any of these caveman tools, you can go ahead and use a digital alternative. You have two options. Option 1, you will need a computer, Mac or PC, a scanner or a smartphone, perfect tablet. Lastly, you will need graphic software. You can subscribe to Adobe Photoshop or buy Affinity Photo, which I personally use. If you don't want to buy a software, you can just use GIMP, which is open source and free. Now you might be wondering, how do I do this in Microsoft Paint?
No! God, please, no!
Stay away from Microsoft Paint. Option 2, any iPad that supports Apple Pencil, a drawing app like Procreate, Photoshop, Sketchbook, lots of them out there. Pick your favorite. To keep this video short and sweet, I'm only going to demonstrate the first option, leaving the second option for the next video. Here is the reference I'm using in this video. It's a simple picture of an apple. I provided its link in the description if you want to follow along. Go ahead and fire your editing software and import your own reference photo into it. I'm using Affinity Photo or Windows. Both Photoshop and GIMP have similar features. We'll start with a rough sketch of this reference. At this point, we all need like an outline. No shading required. Now, as you can see, I will start dragging these guidelines here to help me do the sketch. Now we'll jump onto the paper. If you just started drawing, you may need to learn some basic drawing lessons first. Watching drawing tutorials on YouTube can be helpful, but it's also more beneficial to consider enrolling in drawing lessons or workshops, either online or in person. That way you will get personalized feedback and guidance. Now, since this is not a video about sketching, I will skip ahead to the end of this step to save some time. As I said earlier, all we need to draw at this point is an outline of the subject. Now go back to your drawing software, and we want to convert this image into black and white, so I'm going to go ahead and add a black and white adjustment layer. I don't like how it looks like now. Depending on your image, you may want to leave it as it is, or go ahead and play a little bit with these sliders and see how you can make it better. Alright, we're going to leave it like this. Next effect we're going to add is posterize effect. Posterize. We're going to set this value here to 5. As you can see here, this effect reduces the number of colors to 5: black, white, dark, medium, and light grays. What we want to do now is change the blending mode for this effect to soft light, like that. And you may want to reduce the opacity a little bit to around 80. This blending mode allows the image to show through, so we see the real image. Begin to map out the boundaries of each of the 5 shades present in our reference image. Starting with the darkest shade, which is black, I carefully define its borders on the apple's surface. As I go through the different shades from black to white, I switch pencil colors to visually differentiate between them. This process is similar to creating a map that will guide us through the tonal values of shadows and highlights on our subject. Defining these boundaries ahead of time makes the shading process much easier by removing the guesswork. Now we'll start the shading process. Start drawing evenly spaced contour lines, and the main goal here is to have these lines follow the shape of your subject. That helps give the drawing dimensionality. For example, if your subject is round or spherical, aim for curved lines rather than straight ones. If you notice, I'm using here curved lines because the apple is a round object. On flat surfaces like a desk, for example, straight lines work best. The space that you keep between each line is going to define how complex and time-consuming the illustration is going to be. If you widen the space between each of the lines, it's going to take you less time to cover the surface of your subject, but you will end up with a more or less simple illustration, and it will be harder to replicate dimensionality. On the other hand, it will take you more time if you draw the lines closer to each other, but it will make it easy to render the illustration accurately. I will be doing more in-depth tutorials in the future, in which I break down the rendering process for different subjects and textures. So stick around if you're interested to learn more about this. It's getting a little bit quiet around here. Let's play some music, shall we? Now, once you're done drawing the contour lines, use your pencil and black out the black areas. Just try not to apply too much pressure since we want to keep the paper clean. Consider using gloves or putting a piece of tissue paper under your hand. In our reference, we have 3 shades of gray, right? What we're going to do now is go back and thicken the lines where there is dark gray and gradually make them thinner as we transition into the medium and light gray areas. And the line principle is this. Darker tones are made by thickening the contour lines, while lighter tones are made by cutting away the contour lines. The advantage of using regular pencils is that you can make corrections which you wouldn't be able to do if you were using a traditional regular scratchboard. I find that you need a lot of experience if you want to do this directly on a scratchboard. Here I go back again, and using the eraser I start moving away the contour lines from the white highlighted areas. After you finish the shading with your pencils, it's time to scan your sketch. Personally, I use an Epson Perfection V33 scanner. You can grab one of these on eBay for as low as $50. I usually set the resolution to 600 dpi to ensure a high quality scan. Trust me, you don't need to go over 600 or you will end up with a huge scan files that are a pain to work with. If you already have a multi-function printer with scanning capabilities, you're good to go. Most of these printers come with the same 600 dpi resolution, which works just as well, so no need to buy a dedicated scanner. Scanning finished. Let's check out the output. Open it. It's upside down. Let's rotate. Zoom in. As you can see here, the quality is very clear. If you don't have either of these options, you can still grab a photo with your phone. These days, most smartphones have excellent cameras. Just try and take the photo somewhere bright and with plenty of light. Now go back to your photo software and open the scan or photo of your sketch. Take the brush. Now the brush size, let's set that up. opacity flow, don't change those. The hardness, go for 80, because if you set the hardness to 100, the brush strokes are going to be too clean. We don't want that. If you're using Affinity Photo, click on this more button here, go to this tab, Dynamics, and set the size jitter to 100. The hardness jitter as well, let's set this to 70. Okay, close that. Zoom into your artwork. Let's pick the brush again. Don't draw directly on the on the scan. You need to create a new empty layer here. Alright. First time you do this, it's gonna take a lot of time. Just expect that from the get-go, especially if you haven't used graphic tablets before. I'm gonna speed up the recording now until we're finished with the inking process, inking stage, to save you time. Don't worry if you overdo any of these lines, because we can always go back and fix them. The beautiful thing about using digital tools is that you can always go back and fix things. To navigate through the canvas, you can use the spacebar. Just hold the spacebar and use your mouse to navigate, move around. Make sure to save your document every so often, because sometimes these software tend to crash and you end up losing like hours of work. When you want to cover large areas with one color, you can just like increase the brush size, so you get it done very fast. And reduce the brush size to continue. As you may have noticed here, the lines look distorted, and that is intentional. Because if you look closely at the reference, you will see that the surface of the stem has kind of a rough texture. That's why I apply different amounts of pressure to simulate the texture more or less. Here I go back again and adjust the thickness of these lines a little bit more. If you need to make corrections, as is the case here, simply pick the eraser tool, adjust the hardness to 80%, and start brushing over the areas you want to remove. When you finish, pick the brush tool again and continue. I tend to switch between using the brush and the eraser multiple times throughout this process. As you can see here, the spacing between the lines is a little bit off, too wide on the right and too tight on the left. So I will use the eraser tool to remove part of this line and redraw it again. Here I make the outline a little bit thinner because if you look closely at the reference, the edges are subtle and kinda fade off into the background. Now I start to break the lines into dashes in order to lighten the tones going towards the white areas. Throughout this process, you will need to zoom out of your drawing and check your reference photo and see if your illustration has some of that three-dimensional look we're looking for. Now I'm adding these dashes at the end of each line as I transition into the lighter areas. Using the eraser tool, start cutting away from the solid black areas to make the transition into the lighter areas a little smoother. I try to use less pressure as I move deeper inside the black areas. This makes the cutouts progressively thinner and smoother. There are some white artifacts that are seen in the reference, so I'm using the eraser tool here to draw them out. As we're getting closer to wrapping up, go ahead and create an empty layer just below your artwork and fill that layer with white. Now I'm adding some last touches. Obviously there is still room for improvement, but to keep this video at a reasonable length, I will cut it here. Da Vinci once said, art is never finished, only abandoned. He was absolutely right. As you may have realized by now, this video is not a drawing basics tutorial, and it's completely and utterly useless unless you spend a couple more hours watching some more drawing lessons on YouTube. See you in the next video.